Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. Tomorrow is opening night for the NFL. Rams versus Bills. It is going to be amazing. And since the NFL is starting, I figured I should make a ranking of all 32 starting quarterbacks. So here you guys go. Geno Smith is a backup. Don't get me wrong, he's not a bad backup, but he is not a starting quarterback. Seahawks have no starting QBs, and they should be aiming for the number 1 overall pick this year. They're not going anywhere with Geno Smith or Drew Lock if he manages to take the starting job from Geno Smith. Zach Wilson had one of the worst rookie quarterback seasons I have ever seen, up there with the likes of Josh Rosen. Now, it's possible he turns everything around. There are plenty of rookies who have terrible rookie seasons and then become superstars in the NFL. But it's also possible that he becomes the next Josh Rosen, after his first team never quite grasping hold of the starting job and slowly phasing out of the league. This goes for all the sophomore quarterbacks on this list. Most quarterbacks do not have amazing rookie seasons. Players like Justin Herbert are outliers. Most quarterbacks have a bad rookie season and then build up from there. So don't worry about Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Davis Mills, or Mac Jones, or Trey Lance just yet, because they should all have plenty more to go. Plus, in Trevor Lawrence's case, he was on the worst team in the NFL with Urban Meyer as his head coach, so he should improve vastly. A year ago, if you were to tell me that the Texans' third-round pick, who wasn't even a starter a year ago, was going to outplay the top 2 picks in the 2021 NFL Draft, I would have laughed in your face. But somehow he did. He was on a terrible Texans roster, and don't get me wrong, he didn't play very well, but at least he made something out of it. I would say he outplayed Trevor Lawrence, which is crazy. It's really neck and neck between the two of them, but I give Davis Mills the edge here. Daniel Jones was actually having one of the better seasons in his not-so-amazing career before he got injured. Not to say that it was a very good season. He was not playing very well, but at least he showed some improvement. I think this is Daniel Jones' last season as a starter. I don't think he's done enough, but he hasn't been as bad as the people behind him. Trey Lance started, 2 games last season? I did not see enough of Trey Lance to make a very good ranking, but I did like what I saw, hence why I'm putting him above all the other guys, but he's still quite far down the list for that very reason. The whole reason it took me so long to make this video is because the Steelers refused to name a starting QB. It's only now that I found out that Mitch Trubisky is going to start the season as a quarterback. So, finally, I can add him to my rankings. I don't think he's very good, and it wouldn't surprise me if he gets benched for Kenny Pickett after 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. But he's not a terrible quarterback. At least he proved with Chicago that he can be serviceable and help his team in the playoffs, even though the defense did all the work. Marcus Mariota, like Mitch Trubisky, is coming out of a backup job. And it's very close between the two, who to pick. There's a couple cases of that in this whole list. But I have to give Marcus Mariota the edge, because before both of them took their respective backup jobs, Marcus Mariota was playing mediocre. I don't think he was playing great. That's why he got benched for Ryan Tannehill, and the Titans haven't looked back since. More to come. But he wasn't playing terribly. He was on track to make the playoffs, even still. And he almost made the playoffs the year before with that team. Mitch Trubisky just was not that good for Chicago. A lot of people are criticizing Justin Fields, but when I watched him play, he played pretty darn well. That's why I have him ranked this high. He's better than every rookie quarterback I've seen except Mac Jones. I'm worried for Chicago, though. With the offensive line, the receivers they've given him, he might take a step back. Because Ryan Poles has done nothing for Justin Fields. It really hurts me how little he seems to care about his franchise quarterback. So, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, both got plenty of weapons. And Trey Lance already had some good weapons. So all three of them could skyrocket in the rankings. I'm not sure they all will, but it's possible. Meanwhile, Justin Fields is sitting here. His offensive line is the worst in the league. And his only mediocre proven receiver is Darnell Mooney. So I am worried about Justin Fields. Baker Mayfield's career is really hard to judge. He had a good rookie season, plain and simple. Then he had a down sophomore season. Then he brought it all back up and led his team to an 11-5 record and into the playoffs. Now you could argue that's mostly Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb doing that work, but even still, he played pretty darn well that year. Then this past year, he had a down year. It's possible that was just because he had multiple injuries going on that he was trying to play through. But I'm not entirely positive. The Lions were terrible last year. But if you look at how they played their games, every single game they played was pretty darn close, especially in the first half of the season. A lot of that can be attributed to Jared Goff. Don't get me wrong, he didn't carry the team or anything, but he didn't play absolutely awfully like some thought he might. Boy, did the Dolphins have a weird season. They start out the season 1-0, looking great against the Patriots, who seem revived. Then they lose 7 games straight, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, will the Dolphins get a top 5 pick, or will they make it to the top 10? I thought Tua was gone as a starter. They're gonna trade for someone or draft someone, but then they turned it around and finished with a 9-8 record, still missing the playoffs, and then the Dolphins fired Brian Flores. I still don't get why, no one really knows, but Tua hasn't played amazing, but he hasn't played badly. Most people seem to think he's this huge bust, but he's been pretty solid throughout his NFL career. The only thing he needs to work on is throwing a ball more than 20 yards. Matt Ryan had probably the worst season of his career since his rookie season this past season. But most of that can be attributed to the fact that the Falcons had no offensive line and Calvin Ridley missed most of the games with a mental health issue, which then he decided to gamble through and is now suspended for this whole season. Luckily for Matt Ryan, he got out of that whole mess and is now in Indianapolis, where he has a massive chance to revive his career and become a top 15 quarterback again. Not much to say here. Mac Jones had a pretty good rookie season. It wasn't as great as Justin Herbert's or Joe Burrow's before he got injured, and there's been plenty before him who had better rookie seasons, but it wasn't bad. He led his team to the playoffs. Ryan Tannehill was average all season. That's why he is pretty much directly middle of the pack. Not quite, but pretty darn close. He threw plenty of interceptions and never played that amazingly, but he was never terrible. Everyone on that team got injured except Tannehill, and they still managed to get the #1 conference seed. So I've got to give Tannehill credit for leading mostly backups to the #1 seed. Let me set something straight to all you Carson Wentz haters. I don't love the guy, but he played pretty darn well last season, until the last 2 weeks of the season when he played terribly and unraveled everything else. causing Indianapolis likely to trade him. That is likely the reasoning. But before that, he was playing pretty well. The Colts should have made the playoffs if it wasn't for him. So you can blame him on that, or he'd be higher. But before that, he wasn't throwing the interceptions like he did the year prior. This year, hopefully for his sake, he can revitalize the career, have the season he did last year, except not collapse in the last 2 weeks. It seems kind of fitting to put Kirk Cousins in the exact middle of starting quarterbacks. He's not great, but he's not terrible. He's average. And the 16th spot is perfect for him. It's really too bad that Jameis Winston got injured, because he was on track to have the best season of his career. And I suspect he will play as well this year, despite not having Sean Payton. The biggest thing was he cut down on all the interceptions. Aside from that, on the Buccaneers, he was a really good quarterback. Jalen Hurts gets criticized plenty, but he led the Eagles, who seemed like a terrible team this time last year, to the postseason. I can't argue with that, so he has got to be higher up in the rankings than most people think he should be. Derek Carr is like a fine wine. I have never used that phrase before, but I guess there's a first time for everything. He seems to keep getting better year by year by year. He hasn't peaked yet, it doesn't seem like. And this year with Devontae Adams, he could play even better, which is almost scary to think about. I don't think he'll be superstar status, but he is getting pretty darn good. Now we enter the top 12. This is what I consider to be the truly elite quarterbacks in the league. There's a huge gap between 13 and 12. Russell Wilson was injured last year, and once he came back, he clearly wasn't ready. He was not playing very well. He probably had the worst season of his professional career. So hopefully he can turn things around with a far better Broncos team, and it hurts me to say that as a Seahawks fan, but it's true. Matthew Stafford won a Super Bowl. I don't like the Rams, but I'm glad Matthew Stafford did manage to win a Super Bowl in his career. The biggest knock on him is that he threw a ton of interceptions last season. Interception after interception. He tied with Trevor Lawrence for a league most interceptions. So that is not a very good statistic for him to have. That's really what weighs him down here. Dak Prescott struggled through a calf injury for the latter half of the season. He played fine. Cowboys managed to make the playoffs pretty darn well, but then lost in the first round, as the Cowboys tend to. For those of you that don't know, the Cowboys recently have been the Maple Leafs of football. They always lose in the first round. So, hopefully, Dak can turn around this year and truly have an injury-free season. But it's starting to look like Dak Prescott will have to deal with these injuries for the rest of his career. My pick for the 2023 MVP award is Josh Allen. But people need to realize that Josh Allen did not have a very good season last year. Don't get me wrong, it was great. But compared to his season before, it wasn't that great. The Bills started off the season pretty strong, but then everything started to unravel. Basically the opposite of Kansas City. And then Josh Allen exploded in the playoffs. He played amazing in the first game, and then amazing even though they lost to the Chiefs. You guys all know how it went. And he played lights out, but that was the end of his season. Like I said, Patrick Mahomes had the polar opposite season of Josh Allen. He started throwing interceptions like crazy, and the Chiefs' defense couldn't do a thing, so it wasn't entirely his fault. But even still, he did not have a very good first half of the season. Then in the second half, he turned things around again, and started to play quite a bit better. He still didn't seem like himself from the years prior. For the first half of the season, Lamar Jackson carried the Ravens on his shoulders. I mean, just completely. There wasn't an inch of the Ravens on the ground. He just played lights out, and that's the whole reason the Ravens were doing as well as they did. Then his quality of play started to go down a bit, and then he missed most of the end of the season with an injury. Deshaun Watson was in a holdout for the whole 2021 season. So I just took his 2020 ranking and compared it to the 2021 rankings of the rest of the quarterbacks. He will not play the first 11 games this season, which will impact his rankings vastly. But when he comes back, if he plays as well as he did in 2020, then the Browns could still make the playoffs as long as Jacoby Brissett doesn't completely collapse under them. I have these 5 quarterbacks up here because they, unlike so many quarterbacks in the top 12 for some reason, did not endure a late season collapse. So even if at one point they weren't as good as the quarterbacks behind them, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, then they were better than them overall. That all starts with Justin Herbert, who played really well in his sophomore season. He just played lights out. He was balling out every single game. And they should have made the playoffs. I blame Brandon Staley completely for that loss. Obviously, there's a couple other factors. The defense could have played a bit better. But if Brandon Staley hadn't called that timeout, then it's possible the Raiders wouldn't have kicked a field goal and just gone for the tie. And then all of this would have been so much better looking on Justin Herbert's resume. Joe Burrow arguably had a worse season than Justin Herbert. But these guys are neck and neck. Don't get me wrong. You can pick either. But the biggest deciding factor of me putting Joe Burrow above Justin Herbert was the fact that Joe Burrow managed to lead a team that was terrible the season before, partially because he was injured for half of it, to the playoffs, and then to the Super Bowl. They won the division, then they go all the way to the Super Bowl. He's got to get credit for that. Most people have Kyler Murray ranked far lower, but Kyler Murray was by far the favorite for the MVP award through the first half of the season. Then, as usual, the Cliff Kingsbury-run team, they endured a late season collapse. And then Kyler Murray missed a couple games, which did not help his odds. But it wasn't him that collapsed. It was the team around him. He still played pretty well when healthy. How? That's my only question. How did Tom Brady play so darn well last season, given that he's 45 now? It makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to anyone how Tom Brady has defied time for so long. He was the MVP runner-up, hence why I put him in this spot. And he played to show it. He played very well through most games. What can I say? The MVP winner played lights out. I would argue better than his past MVP season. And this year didn't have any real competitors. The year before, Patrick Mahomes was close. I thought he should have won the MVP award. But this year, it was Aaron Rodgers by far. And he showed it. He played extremely well, and he was deserving in that MVP award. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again soon. But for now, check out the Bills-Rams game tomorrow. It is going to be amazing.